Welcome back to Wake Up Cricket, powered by Pavilion Picks. Will we see a semi-final of a World Cup without any Asian teams now that Pakistan and Sri Lanka are out of the World Cup? And that is exactly what we'll get into. But before we get into all of that, hit the subscribe button, get us to 200 subscribers. Let us get into things.
So, yes, we will get into the heart of the matter and starting with the clash that happened yesterday. Southpaws crushed Sri Lanka. Ravindra and Santner star as New Zealand crushed Sri Lanka to stay in the hunt. New Zealand delivered a commanding all round performance to eliminate Sri Lanka from the tournament with a crushing 61-run win, keeping their own semi final hopes alive. Defending a competitive total, the Black Caps unleashed a ruthless bowling display led by Rachin Ravindra's superb 4 for 27 after Matt Henry struck with the very first ball of the chase to remove Pathum Nissanka. Sri Lanka never recovered from that early blow, with Mitchell Santner controlling the middle overs expertly on a surface that offered more tone than expected. The clinical defense sends a strong warning to England, New Zealand's next opponent in a must win clash. Captain Dasun Chanaka called the defeat embarrassing for the hosts, admitting Santner's key partnership had taken the game away and conceding his side misread the pitch after opting to bowl first. Santner credited a slow ball strategy for exploiting the conditions, while player of the match Ravindra highlighted New Zealand's smart adaptation and composure under pressure. With Sri Lanka out, net run rate permutations now loom large, Pakistan's qualification hopes hinging on a combination of heavy margin victories and New Zealand slipping up against England. So almost every game a must win in the Super 8.
Basically, and for Dasun Shanukar to say that it was embarrassing, I think that's spot on for him, especially with the kind of start or the kind of tournament that Sri Lanka were having. Of course, they had that odd defeat, but especially at home, when you have New Zealand at 84 for 6, you are expected to be able to firstly get them all out and then secondly be able to chase that down. But that's exactly what did not happen. Now, in the Indian New Zealand series, in the build up to that entire series, in every game, they were talking about how Mitchell Santner has greatly improved his batting. And that's what we saw on display yesterday, where he scored 47 of 26, but along with him, McConchy also got runs 31 odd. And basically, they just took the game away from Sri Lanka once the threat bowlers were out. They were able to capitalize because they knew that Sri Lanka just had a couple of bowlers who were bowling well. They let them bowl out, and then after that, took the attack to the New Zealanders. Now, from there on, it was always going to be a game of catch up because Sri Lanka lost their wickets very early. In fact, I think they were 27 for 3, courtesy Matt Henry, who bowled 2 overs, gave away 3 runs. So clearly, he was on song. And at the end of the day, that's what it was, right? Sri Lanka, I think they're going to be very, very disappointed with how things have turned out. And New Zealand are just one of the sides to beat in the competition now. They're heading into the semi-final, getting better with each and every single game. And at this point, Sri Lanka, of course, is knocked out. And so whatever is to follow for Sri Lanka is just a matter of pride. And hopefully they can at least play that game out. But it will be very sad for them. It's very disappointing for them.
Yeah, the first ball that Matt Henry bowled to the Sri Lankan batter should have just highlighted what was to come, because the way the ball nipped back in and the batter had no clue what to do about it because of how much it nipped back in. Yeah, it was always going to be a bad story to tell after the innings.
Talking about how it nipped back in and the other person had no clue, we move on to the headbutt Dogra incident. Not a big thing, Dogra downplays headbutting incident in Ranji final. Jammu and Kashmir captain Paras Dogra has downplayed the on-field incident in which he headbutted Karnataka player KV Anish during the second day's play in the Ranji Trophy final, saying it wasn't a big deal. Dogra was involved in a heat-in exchange with substitute fielder Anish and headbutted him on the helmet shortly after hitting a four of Prasiddh Krishna. It was just in a little heat of the moment, not a big thing, Dogra said after the day's play. Yeah, it is all settled now. It was momentary. We started talking and chatting after that, so it's all well.
Well, it's a bit weird for him to say that it's not a big deal, especially in a non-contact sport when you do make some contact. And if you don't know what happened, Dogra was batting and there was a fielder at short leg. His name is Anish KV, who's not even part of the playing 11, by the way. And he just head-butted Anish KV and Mayank Agrawal stepped in, and then a lot of players stepped in. He's charged 50% of his match fee. Well, that's not just any small deal. But I don't even think 50% is enough, to be honest. When you make contact in a non-contact sport, I feel like the consequences should be way, way higher. But yeah, that's what happened. That's what's happened now. It's only 50%. There's nothing else that's being done. Jammu and Kashmir, if you talk about the match itself, Jammu and Kashmir are in a very peculiar position. 527, if 527 for six, a lot of runs on the board. Interestingly, a lot of people are also disappointed with the kind of pitch provided in Hubli. A flat deck in a Ranji final is not what people expected. People don't want a first innings lead to decide who is the Ranji Trophy winner, and a lot of that is being talked about. But interestingly, a lot of that wasn't being talked about in the semi-finals when Karnataka scored 700. So I don't know if it's because Jammu and Kashmir has scored all of these runs or because it's a final. I don't think people are being really objective about it. I think it's okay. I mean, you can't really predict the kind of pitch you're getting. As much as you do want to balance in the final and the semi-final, you got to take the same stance in the semi-final if you are doing that in the final. But the incident itself shouldn't have been played. It shouldn't have been like
Happened at all in
yeah
the first
happened at
place.
all.
Yeah.
And even 50%, I don't think is enough. I think the consequences should have been way higher, because 50%, if that's the case, then what's stopping the other players in the other group stages or
Yeah.
just other players in general in the domestic circuit from doing it?
Yeah, plus it's someone like Paras Dogra who's been around for so long, has so much legacy, so it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, right? Especially because, like as you said, it's a non-contact sport, and seeing that kind of incident take place on the field from a very experienced person who's usually known to keep his cool. I don't think he's ever had an incident like this in his career related to temper. So. Temper soaring. It is a final, which is why things can get a little spicy, which was nice to see, but that was crossing the line.
100%.
Well, it takes us back to a final from a couple of decades back, albeit in another sport and albeit in a World Cup. Moving on, Zimbabwe confident, Burl backs Zimbabwe's bowling arsenal to rattle India in Chennai. After being overpowered by West Indies at the Wankhede Stadium, Zimbabwe are banking on the variety in their attack to challenge India in their Super 8 clash in Chennai. All-rounder Ryan Burl highlighted the depth at their disposal, with tall quicks blessing Muzarabani, Richard Nagavra, and others complemented by multiple spin options in Graham Tremor, Sikandar Raza, and Wellington Masakadza. With conditions expected to assist spin on the black soil surface, team combinations will hinge on matchups, particularly against India's left-handed top order. Raza, declared fit after finger injury scare, could play a key role with his range of off-spin variations. Much of Zimbabwe's optimism rests on the towering Muzarabani, whose steep bounce and high release have earned him 11 wickets in 4 innings despite limited preparation following a back injury layoff. Burl credited his resurgence as a major boost, noting his ability to trouble both right and left-handers. Zimbabwe also draw confidence from increased exposure to top-level opposition in recent seasons, believing their improved process and execution can translate into a statement performance against India.
Awesome. So with Zimbabwe, I think that's something we also covered, is that coming into this Super 8 fixture, coming into the games that were going to take place in India, what would be interesting to see is how their spinners line up, because we knew that at places like Chennai, at least this time around, it has aided the Pacers. That's also what we saw a little bit of in the West Indies game, where they started off very brilliantly, Zimbabwe, in 4 overs, giving away just 29 runs, getting that wicket as well. And it was on the back of Muzarabani's performance with the ball itself. But from there on, there were a few bowling changes that were a bit abrupt, and they didn't use their spinners particularly well. But also their spinners just struggled, to be honest. Like Shimran Hetmeyer was just able to clear them and take them all over the place, which means that now for Zimbabwe, what was a strength in that first leg, which was their spin department, is now struggling. And on the back of the fact that West Indies smashed 254, the Zimbabwe bowlers are definitely not going to be as confident as they once would have been. And a lot more does now rest on their fast bowlers. This also is an interesting matchup, right? Because in the game today, in the lead up to this tournament, in the tournament itself, it's been India's openers versus off spin or versus the spinners struggling. And it's been Zimbabwe spinners who've done well. Now they're both in a situation where the openers are not doing well, nor are the spinners now doing well in this India leg. The game is to be taking place at Chennai, and so you would hope as an Indian fan that this is the moment where, okay, Zimbabwe obviously go ahead with the off-spin plan, start off with off-spin, but the Indian batters, because of the quality of off-spin, are maybe able to tear into Sikandar Raza. Now, this could very easily also be flipped around, because Raza does have the odd variation, does ball the quicker deliveries and all of that. So India might have to be a little circumspect, but it's going to be an interesting fixture.
What would be something to look forward to, to look out for
Hmm.
is what Zimbabwe do after winning the toss, because they did win the toss the last time around. They should have batted first, but they bowled first and they lost the game against West Indies. If they do win the toss today, it will be interesting to see if they go on with the pitch and the data, or they do what they really want to do.
Hmm. So, from one knockout fixture to another one, and this is heavyweight knockout. South Africa versus West Indies, clash of heavyweights in another high stake battle in Ahmedabad. West Indies and South Africa, the two remaining unbeaten teams in the tournament, are gearing up for a heavyweight clash of the most literal variety. But even after they finished bettering 7 belts out of each, the victors will have no guarantees of progression just yet. For the West Indies in particular, this feels like a must win contest. They could hardly have laid out a more emphatic marker than their 107-run win over Zimbabwe on Monday, but even allowing for that hefty net run rate boost, a wounded India await them in the final Super 8 fixture on Sunday. If that ends up being a straight knockout, then it'd be best to lay the killer blow here and now.
Now, this will be a very interesting match to watch out for, especially for Indian fans, because India would want South Africa to win that match against West Indies, and then we beat the West Indies, and then we qualify. Then it's just easy for us. But objectively, as match itself, it will be interesting because on paper you would assume heading into the World Cup that South Africa is just far superior. But the way West Indies have been playing in this World Cup, especially with Darren Sammy in the dugout, and we know the last time he played he was the captain for West Indies in the T20 World Cup in India. They went on to win the World Cup against India. And so if anything, if I was going to say, if it were to be poetic, them winning against South Africa and eliminating India would just piece it all together. And as Indian fans, I wouldn't mind that, because as Indian fans, we're also content creators. And I've talked about this before. India losing for content creators as an Indian fan in India, I think is the best possible scenario. But like the matches between West Indies and South Africa would be so much interesting to watch out for. I'm hoping that it's a close match and it's not a match where on paper South Africa do look like a better side, and maybe it might just play out that way. But I still want it to be a close contest because it's such an interesting match.
Like, these are also the only two teams that are unbeaten in the tournament till now, if you think about it. And so, looking at it from that angle, also one of them is going to go down today, which means that there is also a lot on stake. Of course, there is a semi-final at stake, which is bigger than their own personal record heading into this. But yeah, it is going to be West Indies' firepower up against the, I would like to say, tactical precision of South Africa, because they've got their plans spot on in the tournament. They've sized up each and every player really well. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if West Indies win the match, India are almost out.
Yeah.
And so for India to play the game later on wouldn't even make sense as an Indian fan to watch the game. So you'd rather watch the afternoon game than the evening game, because the chances of Zimbabwe winning at 2v5 with this Indian team are quite high also. So you'd rather watch both games as an Indian fan.
Well, you see how the tournament's progressed and how our optimisms have turned to absolute cynicism.
Guys, we won. Think about the semi-finals and the finals live stream that you could have done, had and or were India to progress further. Now, talking about warnings, ECB warns teams Pakistan players will not be excluded from 100 in this ECB and all the teams. Now, the representative says, as the governing body responsible for running the tournament, the ECB is committed to ensuring there's no place for discrimination and has regulations in place to take robust action to tackle any such conduct. Players must not be excluded on the grounds of their nationality. All 8 teams commit to selection based solely on cricketing performance, availability, and the needs of each team. This reflects a broader commitment of the ECB to make cricket the most inclusive sport, creating opportunities, breaking down barriers, and ensuring that players from all backgrounds have a fair and equal pathway to the top of the game. We want the 100 to feature the very best talent from across the world and will continue working proactively to ensure that the competition is a benchmark for inclusivity.
Good on ECB this for them to come out and publicly say that this is how things are going to go and that they've issued warnings, so to speak, to each of the franchisees. Now, it clearly shows that they want to be the boss of this. They clearly show that they are taking a stand against any kind of non-inclusive nature of whatever rumors have been spreading around. But also along with that, I think there was a post from MI London themselves where they've spoken about how they're going to work with the ECB and there's not going to be any sort of discrimination, which I thought was good on their part to just be able to put that out. And for them to then have this joint statement with all of the franchisees means that we mostly won't be seeing anything weird, or it's just a nice way of putting it out there and then still not selecting a Pakistani player. That's a whole other debate for another time. But I think as far as like what their responsibility is to be able to just put that statement out, I think they've done the right thing.
You know what's ironic? Now I feel like the teams would have some pressure to get some Pakistani players because
Yeah.
imagine 4 out of the 5 do and the fifth team doesn't. And then you would all point fingers at the fifth team and say that, hey, you could have taken this player. They've done well. You could have taken Shaheen Afridi. He's done well. Well, Shaheen Afridi would have probably got dropped from the team if he hadn't taken those 4 wickets for starters.
True.
But yeah, I feel like now they're in a peculiar position where if they don't get a Pakistani player, then there'll be fingers pointed at you. So first of all, this shouldn't have started. This shouldn't have been a conversation to begin with. I don't think even though if they're Indian-owned teams or Indian owners owning teams, it should have mattered. But now that this is a thing, and if you don't get a player from the Pakistan origin or the country, then that'll be a whole other conversation where why haven't you gotten a player even though you had so many options?
True. We promise this will be the last day that we talk about this. We've done this thrice now. It's just developments on the same story. But I think the story more or less clears itself out now at this point. And from here on out, it'll just be interesting to see what happens in the 100 when the 100 starts.
Yeah, and the auction. Do they have auctions?
I think they do. Yeah.
However, they get players.
The
Well,
draft.
it's interesting because so far at the 100, the Pakistan representation has been minimal. In fact, this
Yeah.
time around,
Yeah.
it would be a test series that it would be clashing with, and there have been NOC issues in the past where that has been revoked at the last moment. And also now the other side is that ECB has been pretty stern on its anti-discriminatory policies.
Yep.
In the last couple of years, there have been a lot of studies and implementations of reports. Now, from that, we moved to a meme, and we had to summon a man in it who helped India lift the trophy last time around, and we can't help talking about him, despite the fact that he's not a part of the World Cup this time around.
I mean, for starters, if you look at this jersey, you'll realize which T20 World Cup it is. The man carried the Indian team the entire World Cup. I think he was the only one averaging more than 15 for India in this World Cup. He only scored runs. I mean, he was the only one to score runs in the semi-final and the final, but he also bowled quite a few overs in the final, and then we lost against West Indies. That's a whole other. Oh, that was the final, or was that the semi-final?
Semi-final, I think.
Wasn't the semi-final against Australia where
Oh yeah,
he
it was
got
the final.
runs against James Faulkner?
True.
That was a quarter.
But yeah, probably quarterfinal. I don't think I have no idea. At this point, I've forgotten because India didn't win the World Cup, but he just scored a lot of runs. And that's what happened yesterday where Mitchell Santner carried the New Zealand team, scoring 47 of 26, if I'm not wrong. 47 of 26 in itself is such a good score. And then to think of Mitchell Santner being able to do that, truth being told, he can bat and he's finished off games for the Chennai Super Kings in the IPL. You always had hope with Mitchell Santner coming out after MS Dhoni got out when he didn't score a lot of runs because Santner could hit those big sixes. But for him to do that over 26 deliveries, scoring 47 runs is insanity. And also why a lot of people compared him as a joke to Virat Kohli because that's what he did. He carried the batting lineup yesterday. But yeah, just looking at the man.
Carried by a part-timer, a part-time batter. When I first saw that image, I thought it was AI generated. I still think it's AI generated.
Pretty sure.
Because it looks so weird. But anyways, that's beyond the
yeah,
scope
it
of
is,
our
because it's not even his bat.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's
That's how
nothing
it
about
But yeah,
Vignesh
you can see
reminds
we're
us-
rambling on. There's nothing more to add. Mega, over to you.
No, Vignesh reminded us it was semi-finals. Vignesh, hope you've cross-checked
Thank
that
you,
multiple times.
Thanks for that. It's the producer of the show. It's the guy who makes the show look good who's reminded us that it was the semi-final. But yeah, Santner has been great. He's been a great captain so far with the ball, with the bat. He's been doing the job. And so it's great to see him carry the New Zealand team. It's not every day you see an off-spinner being the captain of a team, and he's doing that extremely well. So yes, that's been the news of the day. There are 2 matches to look forward to. We have talked about this before. But what are the 2 matches to look forward to?
South Africa, West Indies, which is happening at 3 p.m. And then you have the bigger game in terms of viewing, India and Zimbabwe. To be fair, I would be interested to see how many people are viewing that 3 p.m. game. But these are the 2 fixtures to watch out for. Both are important fixtures. Both are going to determine a lot of who is going to be going into semi-finals. So watch out for both of these.
Megha, do you have any, maybe not predictions, but highlights, keynotes, things to keep in mind? Oh,
South
okay.
Africa, how meticulous they've been, and West Indies, how the individual components are really firing. We talked about Hitmire, and the last game as well, he clicked, and subsequently there were contributions from down the order as well. And there's been this issue with them, the dot ball percentage, but this time around, one, that has not been as much of an issue, and secondly, the batters are making up for the dot balls with their massive sixes and the big hits.
Mhm.
So West
True.
Indies in a rampaging form, and South Africa on the other hand as well, with how meticulous they've been, and how some of the other batters stepping up, how their bowling is coming together. Ngidi has been in a great form. His tipping Yorkers have been
That's true.
phenomenal. And talking about India, they need to pull up their socks. Would Sanju Samson be back? That's a big question. He's been training hard. He's been given that time to prepare. So it looks like he might just break that monotony of left-handers in the top order.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. We will see what happens and then talk about it tomorrow at 8 a.m. and see if whatever Meg has said has come true or not. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit the subscribe button, get us to 200 subs. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.